And I did figure as an educator I should be here as a parent, you know, in my own school district, and not just worry about this in the school district I teach in.
Sure. Sure. Well, basically all I wanted to do was to really help define things like these buzzwords that are out there. Proficiency. What does that really mean? What does it really mean for our kids? And how is this idea going to change things for our school and for our students? Some clarification of the Common Core, debunking some of those myths. Like some people who are very much against it, it might be because of real concerns. It could also be because of some not so real concerns.
Right.
And I wanted to help debunk some of those. And then to talk about what we're doing. I know this is probably not.
Pretend I don't know anything. Go ahead.
Pretend you don't know anything.
Sure.
All right. So, first of all, this issue of proficiency. The reason why we're talking proficiency is because of a couple things. One, the law. LD 1422 and Maine State law says students by 2018, January 1st, 2018, everyone has to graduate with a proficiency-based diploma. That's next year's freshman.
Right. Which is my Andy, and that concerns me.
Right. So, what does that mean? What does a proficiency-based diploma actually mean? DOE, Maine Department of Education, has defined on their website proficiency as being that, demonstrating mastery, meeting the standard. Well, what does that mean exactly? Really, what is? How is that any different? And that's part of the theme of this. How is this any different? Because it is tremendously different. And we're going to show. I'm going to show you that in a minute.
Okay.
What this is a typical map.
Oh, goody.
Pretty well that I chose math.
I know.
Now, please correct me if my alignment is off, because I'm a social studies, philosophy kind of a guy. So, anyway, when we're talking proficiency, meeting the standard, demonstrating mastery, what that really means is, let's look at what the standard says. The standard says find the area of right triangles, etc., by composing into rectangles, decomposing into other shapes. So what the students are going to do is they're finding area. And they're finding area in real-world applications by composing into triangles, composing into rectangles, decomposing into other shapes. But they're finding area. So what it comes down to is proficiency in this standard would be our students need to not only have strong content knowledge of what the basics are of triangles, 1/2 base times height, find the area, etc. That's correct, isn't it? All right, thank you. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've done area triangle. But also the skills, because that's what the standards are all written as. They're all written as skill statements. Find the area, do this. So they're skill focused with a tremendous amount of content embedded deep in. So in order for a student to show proficiency, the student has to do this. Pretty straightforward. At the 8th grade level, it says to explain and prove the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. Now, a couple things about this. One, you don't have to do the Pythagorean theorem. I want that to be very clear. It doesn't say to do that. It's to explain a proof. It would probably help if you knew how to do it and the basic concepts of it, but explain a proof of the Pythagorean theorem and its converse. Do you understand the basic concepts of triangles of a squared plus b squared equals c squared and its converse? In order to do that, you have to have those basic fundamentals of finding triangles. In order to do that, etc., etc. And at the high school level, to meet proficiency, they're going to go out and prove theorems. So in every case, in every standard, in every proficiency standard, they're doing something. They're doing something in particular. So that's how the standards work, and proficiency means meeting that standard, demonstrating proficiency. So really, how is this going to be any different? Because last time I knew, Pythagoras was not around 7 years ago. We've been teaching Pythagorean theorem and theorems and triangles forever. So really what's going to be different, and how is this proficiency idea going to be very different? So here's the real idea. Here's the real crux of the issue. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put up 4 different students. And I'm going to show you basic, 4 different grades or so, grade level. And the idea is which one or more of these students in our current educational system, in our current grade, would be considered proficient? Student 1, in the 4 main areas, all A's. Student 2, all B's. Student 3, all C's. Student 4, all D's. Take a minute to think, which one would we consider to be proficient, remembering that the definition of proficiency is demonstrating mastery, meeting the standard.
I just pick one.
You can pick one, you can pick multiple.
We would say the A's and the B's would have met the standard.
A's and B's would have met
proficient.
the standard, demonstrate, not the C's.
I don't think in our current system we think of a C as being proficient or mastery. Do you?
C's are kind of a gray area. What about D's? Would a D be considered proficient? Absolutely not. Everyone I ever talked to about this says there's no way that a D is proficient.
Right.
But the reality in this, like in our system here in AOS 94, the high school, whatnot, a 70% is a D minus. If a student gets a D minus in Algebra 1, that student moves on to geometry.
Right.
So that means
all of them are proficient.
they're all proficient.
Right.
Because proficient means demonstrating mastery. And demonstrating mastery, meeting the standards, means you meet the standard, then you go on to the next one.
70 is a C for me. That's why I said no to D.
And so 70 is a C, so a D is what, a 65, a 60?
50.
50?
Yeah, 60.
I mean, and that's one of the things. Every system is different. Every system has a different number allocation. But the reality is, each one of these 4 students, whether A, B, C, D, would be considered proficient. A D is proficient.
Right.
Every teacher, every parent, every person I talk to, there's no way that a D is proficient. Because we don't believe that. A D is not. But I remember a student once told me, hey, Mr. Drewette-Card, a D is for diploma.
Right. It is.
It's true. You can absolutely get a diploma with all D's, and there's no difference. Now, people will say, yeah, but that person's not going to get a good job afterwards or get into a good college. In this day and age, that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
Especially with, so a D is considered proficient now because they advance to the next level. We have said you have met enough level of mastery to be successful at the next level. And I think one of our major questions that we're asking throughout our district is that good enough? Right. Are our expectations high enough? Part of the problem is not just in the A, B, C, D, but it's in percentages. If percentages are oil, proficiency, standards-based grading is water. The two don't mix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a very typical classroom scenario. A person has 4 different quizzes and a test. What I've gone and done just because I can, as I'm in control of my own classroom, and I can do whatever I want to, I have that autonomy, is I have weighted each one, quiz and the test, equally. Because I can. I could say quiz 5, but I call it a test because I have to have tests. What I've done is to find a final average. I average them all together. This is pretty typical. Jenny is our first student. Jenny does very well. Jenny gets 95s on everything. We can pretty clearly see that Jenny has proficiency. There's evidence of that over time, with the tests, the quizzes, and etc. This is the only situation that I'm about to show you that's clear case of proficiency. But this is how we grade. This is how we determine proficiency, and this is where the problem truly lies. Because then you have a student like Kevin. No. Kevin, not necessarily a bad student. 80, 70, kind of, in our system is 70 is passing. So 80s and 70s along the way. On the final test, got a 50. Bombed that test. But still passed with a 7. So moves on. I cannot say with any assurance what that student knows or doesn't know. Then you have a problem like Pete. Pete didn't really do the first 2 quizzes. Pete ignored them. He said, not worth my time, or was sick, or wasn't given options to remediate. The last three, 95s along the way. All three showing proficiency, showing a high level of academic achievement. Pete fails a class. And then there's Rodney. Rodney is a behavioral issue. Rodney has a bit of an attitude. And Rodney doesn't do any of the work in the classroom. It's hard enough just to get him awake. When it came time to take the test, Rodney got an A. Rodney aced it. So the problem with our ABCD, the problem with our current standards, the reason how proficiency is going to change, which one of these columns best shows what the students have actually learned?
Test.
The test would. But that's the very last one. But that's not how we grade.
Right.
That's not how we show proficiency. And in fact, it's even deeper than that. You can clearly say that there's enough evidence to show that Jenny has proficiency. I would further say that there's enough evidence to show that Pete has proficiency, as there's multiple opportunities that he's shown that he can do this high-level work, etc. Rodney has shown proficiency, but there's still a question about it. I would probably want to go and do some more remediation just to make sure, because there's only the one. The real issue is Kevin. Kevin is the real problem. By the way, I just happen to choose these names. I happen to choose these names from one of my favorite TV shows. So that's really where they came from. But the problem with Kevin in this scenario is pretty easy to see. At no time does Kevin show proficiency. At no time does Kevin show any kind of level of mastery at a high level, what we would expect, yet Kevin is allowed to advance. So the difference in what we typically do and what proficiency is proficiency is saying, no, we need to make sure that our students are meeting this standard. And we can't allow that to go any further. Further than that, there's a real-world connection here. Because the real world, I hear this all the time. Like one of the things that I would say is, with remediation, what about time? And how much time do you give to a student to rework a test, or to rework a scenario, rework a quiz, a homework problem? Do you provide that opportunity? And I hear people all the time say, well, the real world requires deadlines. The real world requires deadlines. Well, yes and no. They do require deadlines, but the real world really expects proficiency. That's really what the real world wants. They want you to do a good job and to do it well with high quality. Does our current educational structure and system, does it meet that need? Does it mirror that? And that's some of the questions that we're asking. Does our grading system, for example, does our curriculum, do our instructional methodologies, our assessments, both formal and informal, both summative and formative, do they really best mirror this proficiency and high quality that the real world truly expects? When we test, typically, traditionally, in schools, take a test in a class, for example, math test, end of a unit test. They come in, they sit down, they take that test, then they leave. We go home and grade it, come back, put it in the grade book, here's what you got, moving on to the next test. I remember when I was younger, my father actually said to me once, because I got like a D or C on a test or something, afterwards I got the grade, he said, did you go back and did you actually look at the questions you got wrong to see what you did to improve? And I remember this because it's still stuck in my head. I looked at him and I said, no. Why would I go back and look at that? We're moving on. I can't change that grade. So that learning stopped. But in the real world, what tests are there that you can't take multiple times to show proficiency? SATs, multiple times. The Praxis, the GRE, the bar exam to become a doctor, driver's licenses, pilot licenses. You can all take these multiple times to show proficiency. It's not a one and done. You take it, you get a score. If you don't pass it, what do you need to improve? You go back, you work on those things, you come back. It's only in schools with kids where we set it up so it's a one-and-done situation. Speaking of proficiency and speaking of pilot licenses, what if this scenario was in pilot school and this unit was on landing? Would you want Kevin flying your plane? I would much rather have Rodney fly my plane because at least he proved in one situation, in a situation that counted, that he could do it. But Kevin showed time and time again that he couldn't. But he advances. So this is part of the problem of proficiency and our current system. And there's a lot that goes with it. One of the things that I'm recommending is find out some more information. Some places to go, some things to do. For example, the Maine DOE website on proficiency has a lot of resources, and more are coming every few weeks. They have sample graduation standards now. They have protocols and criteria for how to develop power standards and proficiency standards. It's becoming actually a really usable and functional website, which is saying a lot for me.
And the DOE.
Right.
They need you.
Also, if you...
They need you. Usually their websites are over.
Oh, yeah, the websites usually
They can't follow it at all.
Yeah. They usually are... Over the last couple of years, they've gotten infinitely better. Also, if you're on Twitter, I don't know if you're on Twitter at all, but there is a weekly chat, a hashtag chat called SBG, Standards-Based Grading Chat, where folks like Rick Ramelli and Ken O'Connor and Tom Gusky, national experts on these issues, come in and they actually join in the discussion. They help moderate sometimes. So you can get connected with other educators, other leaders, professionals in this field to talk about these exact issues that we're facing. We're not the only ones. And this is a great opportunity. I do this almost every week, as long as my little kids allow me to, because sometimes they wake up. I have a 1-year-old baby, and so. Yeah. Every Wednesday at 9 a.m. on Twitter. And it's free, wonderful professional development. I strongly recommend it. And then these researchers, some of the best. You're going to find high quality, easy to read, easy to follow stuff on grading, proficiency, and standards-based education. So that's kind of a overall of the what and why proficiency, that it's not really just about the law, LD 1422, but it's that we recognize that our current system is kind of setting our students up to, and if you want, I can actually email you the slides and everything. Just, I can get that from you. Is our current grading system is setting our students up to not succeed, to allow them to have some struggles later on, because we allow them to move on without showing proficiency. Common Core is the other part. I already made mention of Common Core a little bit earlier regarding those standards that I showed. For those of you who don't know, Common Core is a set of academic standards in English, language arts, and mathematics. And Maine, as a state, adopted them in 2009, I want to say, by both Department of Education, Board of Education, legislative, and governor approval. So what happened to Maine learning results? This is a common question that I get. All that work that the teachers had gone and done has been thrown away. No. All that's happened is the ELA and math areas have been cut out and the Common Core has been put in its place. The rest of the Maine learning results are still there. The reason why Common Core is a really beneficial for our students and for our educational system is because it is a very clear, very specific, leveled, and measurable set of learning goals. Those I showed earlier in math. There's a clear progression of what is to be learned. They are skill-focused and content-embedded. much more so than being content-focused. We want it to be skill-focused because in the real world, it's not just having the trivia. We're not just trying to train all of our kids to be the next Ken Jennings, that Jeopardy guy, but to be actual doers. And they're based on principles of problem solving, creativity, innovative thinking. 45 states have signed on and agreed to the Common Core. It is not a federal mandate. This is a group of people, professionals that came together and said, you know, what's going on in Maine really is not all that different than what they're teaching and learning in Wisconsin. What they need to know to be successful in a 21st century world, is it really that different? Are our current state standards that different? And what they found out was that they weren't, and so now we have things like Common Core. People say, well, why don't we have it for science? Well, we do. Next Generation Science Standards, NGSS. They haven't been adopted by Maine yet, but they're out there. What about social studies? They're coming. They're working on them right now. Another group aligned to Common Core. Same with the arts. Same with foreign language. This is the way that it's progressing now. So that all these folks, all these different states have the same target. We are in the most transient time of our culture. People move more than they ever did before. And not just moving from Guilford down to Dexter. They're moving from Rhode Island to Oregon. Like that. It happens all the time. And more so than it ever has before. So for that to happen, for schools to actually function well, for students to actually learn better, there needs to be those common targets. But what that does mean, the fear is that everything's prescribed. There is not one prescribed lesson plan for Common Core. It gives a goal. It gives a set of goals to learn in a progression. And then it becomes up to the school curriculum, the school instruction, and the teachers to say, here's how I'm going to get the students there. It's not a curriculum. They're standards. They're learning goals. They're objectives to be met. Once you get to one, you move to the next one. That's all they are. A mandate from the federal government, it's not that. The last thing I want to talk about is this one focused on testing. And some people might say I'm being semantic. It's not focused on testing, it's focused on assessment. Well, aren't they the same thing? Well, yes and no. I mean, you do test, and a test can be an assessment, and an assessment can be a test. But testing typically only happens once. One time, get a measurement, a snapshot of what happens there. Assessment happens over time. If you're going to get your house and property assessed, it's going to compare it to a previous assessment, and then you're going to see what has changed over time, and then it's going to grow from there. That's what assessment is. And there's a big focus on the standardized assessments being used, whether it's Smarter Balanced or the PARC test. Maine's a Smarter Balanced test. And the impact that's going to have. But if you really look at it, they're all looking at it from a perspective of not just from the one time, but from the time they take it to the next time they take it. What's the growth? And then, it's not even looking at it in punitive ways. It's saying, what's the growth? What happened with this kid? And what interventions did we do to try to help support this child, the student, to move forward to the next? If the student did not meet that grade level, what can we do next? Common Core is about assessment. It's really focused on that assessment of each level. Not about the testing. That's a DOE thing. That's whatever else. But what this is all really about, it's focused on, is the assessment of learning and for learning. So since the Common Core is this set of clear level measurable learning goals, and proficiency, either the learning goals are met, we are using the Common Core standards, for example, and the Next Gen Science standards as those learning goals. And we are going to be using those as the proficiency marks, more or less. We are also looking at synthesizing some of these standards so that there aren't as many. There are quite a few of them to make what's called power standards. But the proficiency line, this is maybe just my personal aside on the bottom there. The proficiency side really is all about, we stop accepting what's just good enough. I remember reading someone once said, the only thing that's unacceptable in our schools should be that we move on. We do everything, and there's every other option to get the students to learning. The only thing we don't do is just move on. Because that does everyone a disservice. It is a great idea. It is an ideal situation for the educational system because we're talking about raising our expectations. We're talking about drawing lines in the sand and saying your students are going to need it no matter what, and we're not going to accept anything less. And that sounds great. But there are issues. And there are real issues. And there are challenges that we have to face. And that we as a district are talking about. Schedules and time. That's a big one. Time is a big one. For example, if we know that students, we want to create our system based on learning. Learning is a process. It is all process. But our structure, our system is based on product. Having an outcome, having a grade, having a result. But we want to be focused on becoming a system of learning, which means that we are all process and the product in the end might not matter so much. We want to see the growth. All right, how do we do that? So if we have that final test, like we said earlier, with that one student, that one and done, well, what if we said one of the questions that we pose to our faculty, one of the challenges we pose to our faculty, our district is, what if we got rid of zeros and eliminated Fs and only gave incompletes? What if we did that? What kind of an impact would that have, not only on student learning, but system-wide? And we're starting to see some of the results of that, both positive and negative. But this is an issue. Time is a major issue. How are we as a system working with time? And with schedules. Do we have blocked schedules? Do we have time? How do we manage all that? And those are questions that our staff are adjusting and are dealing with. Levels and structures, because we all know, we've all had those students who, one classroom, 25 student classroom, you have 2 or 3 students who are a grade level ahead, you have 2 or 3 students who are a grade level behind, then you have some mixture in the middle. Well, how do we deal with that? A question that we've also asked our faculty is the best indicator of advancement a birthday? Is that really the best indicator, the best assigner of advancement? For example, you turn 9, so you get to go up a grade level. You turn 10, you get to go up a grade level. Because that's currently how it's set up. You have a birthday, you get to advance. Is that good enough? But that's how it's always been. Or been for a long time at least. And these are things that are very difficult to go and change. How do we report this stuff? How do we grade? Do we get rid of A, B, C, D, F? Do we do a 1, 2, 3, 4? Do we do giraffe, smiley face, lion, building? How do we grade a report? Our high school is looking at this. They're going to a bunch of different places to see how other schools in the state are doing it. And we are becoming more explicit with what it is, to really hone down and define what is our level of proficiency. What is going to be our line in the sand? What is going to be that we're going to say this is proficiency? We're really working hard to get that, to define that, and it's a long process. The hardest one is the last one. This traditional mindset of education. Getting it where I mean, you can see it actually here in this building right here. Teacher, students. That old mindset of how it's even just set up. How we approach our students. How are we setting up our environment to be based around engagement? To engage our students, or to have them come in and self-motivate them themselves. What are we doing to encourage that? What are we doing to discourage that as well? Asking those questions. Looking at a model framework. We're using the art and science of teaching as our instructional framework. We are going around the building using walkthrough evaluations, observations, to say, what do we do? Where are we on this spectrum? To change how we approach. Because this proficiency system is very difficult because it requires a lot different thought. And so that is another challenge that we are trying to face. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to host some of these things, to engage and to start asking people or having people have questions. So that's about all I got. Questions from the very attentive crowd that I wildly appreciate.